Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. This is a B1 level video in language arts, and today we're going to be talking about researching and summarizing. So in the last lesson we read the start to an expository text explaining how to prepare for tests, and so this lesson we'll read the next part of that article. So just to review, what advice did the first part of the article give? If you remember, it talked about creating a study schedule. And then look at the pictures and what advice do you think the second part will give? So just kind of form your own thoughts about that based on the pictures. All right, we're now going to read the second part of the article, and you'll decide whether your predictions were correct and what advice does the article give. You can pause the video and read on your own, or you can follow along as I read. Another piece of advice that is often given to students is to take regular breaks from studying. For example, instead of studying for hours and hours in a row, students should take a 5-minute break every 30 minutes of studying. There seems to be some evidence for this. A 2021 study by the Education Research Society found that students who took regular breaks got test scores 27% higher than those who studied without breaks. A lot of people also think that studying with others can help when preparing for tests. The theory is that working with others allows students to share their knowledge with each other. According to Dr. Nkunku of Forest University, this is good advice. Working with others makes preparing for tests a lot easier, says Dr. Nkunku. As well as being able to help each other, students often feel that studying together is more fun than studying alone. This means they spend more time studying. So what pieces of advice would be to take regular breaks and to study with others. All right, so now we're going to look at this article again and answer the questions. I won't read it aloud again. You can pause the video and read it again if you would like, but then restart the video when you're ready to talk about the questions. So how often should students take a break from studying? Well, here it said students should take a 5-minute break for every 30 minutes of studying. How long should the breaks be? 5 minutes. What evidence is there for this advice? Well, it's based on a study by the Education Research Society. And why might studying with other people be a good idea? Well, it could be that it allows students to share their knowledge with each other. And it means it might make preparing for tests easier. And it's more fun, so students spend more time studying. And what evidence is there for this advice? It's based on a quote by a professor at Forest University. So introducing sources. It is sometimes useful to give a source for information. This shows that the information is not just the opinion of the writer. So look at the examples from the text of giving sources. And a source is a noun which means the person or place that information comes from. So one of the ways is X found that, and then you give the information. So a 2021 study by the Education Research Society found that students who took regular breaks got test scores 27% higher than those who studied without breaks. And then you could frame it as according to X, and then cite the source. According to Dr. Nkunku of Forest University, this is good advice. Then you can use a quotation and then says X. Working with others makes preparing for tests a lot easier, says Dr. Nkunku. And so see if you can think of any other expressions that we can use for giving sources. So maybe X states that, or X says that, or it is found in a particular source that. So those are some other expressions that you might use for giving sources. So we're going to look at the information below and see if you can make sentences to introduce this information to the source. So people who exercise for 30 minutes every day live 5 years longer on average. So you could say something like Professor Foster of New State University says that, and then the quote. Students should always take notes in class. So Mrs. Lahovic, a science teacher. So according to Mrs. Vlahovic, students should always take notes in class. Um, 2019 research by the Sleep Research Institute found that most people need 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night to be healthy. And according to my grandfather, teenagers should eat at least 5 portions of vegetables each day. Now, information needs to come from a source that we can trust, and sources that we can easily trust are called reliable sources. So if you are writing about chemistry, which source do you think is more reliable? Your younger brother or Dr. Zhang, a chemist? Well, if you're writing about chemistry, probably the chemistry professor would be the more reliable source in this case. So there are many sources of information, so it's important to choose reliable ones. So start by asking these questions. Is the information from a respected and well-known source? Who is the source? How do you know that you should believe them? Generally, information from well-respected publishers, universities, major newspapers, and experts is more reliable than information from unknown sources. Does the source have a strong understanding of the topic? So a science expert is probably reliable for scientific topics, but less reliable for politics. In the same way, a political researcher is likely to be reliable for political topics, but not for scientific ones. And is the source balanced? Some sources only look at one side of an issue. They might be persuasive texts trying to make you believe something. It is therefore important to consider the purpose of the source. And is the information up to date? Recent information is usually better than older information. Even if something was reliable when it was first written, it might now be unreliable because new information is always being discovered. Information from this year is likely to be more reliable than information from 50 years ago. Okay, so you're going to write an expository text about how students can reduce stress. So as you get ready to write, think about these questions. So what does it mean to feel stressed? What causes stress for students? What do you do to reduce stress? And what sources do you think will be most useful and reliable for this topic? And explain your choices. Alright, so now you're going to read the information below and discuss the questions and evaluate the source. Are you going to use this in your expository writing? So this source is your neighbor, Bertha, a restaurant manager. She says, when I was in school, the only times I felt stress were just before the big tests at the end of the year. Other than that, life in school was really enjoyable. After I studied hard, then the tests weren't so bad either. I think students today should study hard too, and then they won't feel stressed at all. So is the information from a respected and well-known source? Well, you might respect Bertha because she's your neighbor, but she's not well known. I mean, she's probably not known by, people outside of her community. Also, she's a restaurant manager, and, it doesn't really being a restaurant manager doesn't really have anything to do with studying for tests or feeling stressed. It would be different if she were a teacher, an educator, or a professor of education, or even maybe a psychologist who studies stress. Does the source have a strong understanding of the topic? Well, she bases it on her own experience in school, so it's really more just her opinion. Um, is the source balanced? Not really. It just gives a one side. And is the information up to date? Well, Bertha seems like she's somewhat older, and she talks about when she was in school. So this is probably not like very recent information. Okay, now read the information below and discuss the questions and evaluate the source, and then decide if you're going to use it in your writing. And this is a 2022 Government Student Survey report. We surveyed nearly 100,000 students from across the country, and the results indicated three main sources of stress: tests, social stress, relationships with friends and family, and worries about the future. Of these, tests were the largest cause of stress, with 87% of students stating that tests made them feel stressed or very stressed. So, is the information from a respected and well known source? Well, it's from a government survey, so that's a little more well known and respected probably than your neighbor. Does the source have a strong understanding of the topic? Well, they surveyed 100,000 students from across the country, so that's where they got the information. Is the source balanced? Well, it does talk about there being three sources of stress, so it doesn't just focus on tests. Is the information up to date? Well, it's from 2022, so that's 2 years old, so fairly up to date. And so you can make some notes of any useful information that you want to use in your writing. Now, evaluate this source, discuss the questions, and decide if you're going to use it in your expository writing. And this is Dr. Hakimi, a well-being researcher at the Institute of Health and Well-being. There's no doubt that being a teenager can be a stressful time. However, it doesn't have to be. Most teenagers feel stressed because they don't have anyone to talk to about their problems. They feel that they can't talk to their friends because they don't want to look weak, and their family feels too distant. That's why it's important for schools and teachers to try to support students more. Well, is the information from a respected and well-known source? Well, this person is a well-being researcher at an institute. Um, does she have a strong understanding of the topic? Well, she knows a lot about stress, probably because of her research. Is the source balanced? Well, I mean, she knows a lot about stress. I'm not sure how much she knows about test taking in school, so maybe somewhat balanced. And is the information up to date? We really don't know. Was she interviewed recently? Is this from a report from 10 years ago? We really don't know if it's up to date. And then finally, we've got some other information below and evaluate this source. And this is Pedro, one of your classmates. I think students who say they are stressed are just being silly. They probably don't work hard enough. School is easy for me, so I don't feel stressed. If I am not stressed, why should anyone else feel stressed? So is the information from a respected and well-known source? Well, he's a classmate. You might respect him, but he's probably not well known outside of the class. Um, does he have a strong understanding of the topic? Well, he has personal experience with taking tests, but it seems like he's not very balanced because he says school is easy for me, and that's not the case for everyone. School isn't easy for everyone. Is the information up to date? We could guess that yes, it probably is, but it's really more just his opinion and not really based on facts. All right, so you're going to make an expository text about reducing student stress. So make some notes of your ideas in the table. and add evidence and sources from the previous slides. You want to come up with at least 3 ideas and evidence and source, because this is going to be a 3-paragraph essay. So it's important to maintain a neutral tone in expository writing, so review the techniques from the previous lesson. We use general nouns. This means that students do not need to cram right before their tests. It appears to be good advice as teachers have been promoting study schedules for years. Parents sometimes worry because their children go to bed too late. And also use cautious statements. It appears to be good advice as teachers have been promoting study schedules for years. Students who make study schedules might do better than those who do not, and it could be the case that time management is the most important factor. All right, so now write the text, use sources, and make sure that your work meets the criteria, using appropriate sources, using general nouns, and using cautious statements. And again, if you would like some feedback on your writing, feel free to send me an email at this email address. All right, and so again, just as a review, think about what we've covered in this lesson. What does it mean for a source to be reliable? Why is it important for sources to be reliable? And what are some questions you can ask to evaluate how reliable a source is? That brings us to the end of today's video. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have any questions, leave those for me in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.